Sir, you need to step away from that seat, now. The cabin froze. Air conditioning hummed. Somewhere behind the curtain, a glass clinked. Every head in first class turned as one. Seat 2A. The wrong seat, according to her. The man didn't move. He sat still, shoulders relaxed, hands folded, eyes forward, like someone who had learned long ago that reacting too fast only gave power away. Evelyn Hartman stood in the aisle, spine straight, chin lifted, one manicured finger hovering inches from his chest. 42. Immaculate. Tailored cream blazer, silk blouse the color of bone, hair smoothed into a perfect low twist that never moved even when she did. She smelled like money and control. Expensive perfume, dry confidence, the kind that didn't ask for permission. "I don't care what his boarding pass says," she said, loud enough for the first row and the second to hear. "People like him don't sit here." The word people landed hard. Not shouted, sharpened. A ripple moved through the cabin. A man across the aisle lowered his newspaper by half an inch. A woman 2 rows back paused mid-sip, champagne hovering near her lips. No one spoke. No one corrected her. Silence has a way of choosing sides. The man in seat 2. A finally turned his head. Slow, controlled. His eyes were calm, dark, unreadable. He looked at Evelyn the way a surgeon looks at a monitor. Assessing, not emotional, not defensive. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "I'm seated where I'm assigned." Evelyn laughed once, short, sharp. No humor in it. "Assigned," she repeated, tasting the word like it offended her. "I fly this route twice a month. I know who belongs up here. And you are not one of them." She gestured with her free hand, palm up, like presenting evidence. "Look at you." The camera would have lingered on the details. The charcoal hoodie, clean, understated. The black joggers, pressed but relaxed. White sneakers without a scuff. To some, he looked casual. To Evelyn, he looked like a mistake that had slipped through a crack meant for other people. A flight attendant hurried over, heels soft on carpet. Jessica Miller, early 30s. Too earnest for this moment. Her smile came fast, then faltered when she saw Evelyn's face. "Is everything all right here?" Jessica asked, voice practiced, eyes darting between them. "No," Evelyn said. "It is not." She didn't raise her voice. She never needed to. Her tone carried the expectation of obedience, the kind learned early and reinforced often. This man is in the wrong cabin, and I want him moved before this flight goes anywhere. Jessica glanced at the seat number, then at her tablet, then at the man. "Sir, may I see your boarding pass?" He nodded, reached into his jacket. Slow movements, deliberate, no sudden gestures. He handed it over. Jessica scanned it. Green confirmation. Her brow furrowed. Seat 2A. First class. Evelyn leaned closer. Too close. "Check it again." "I already did," Jessica said, softer now. "Well, then your system is wrong," Evelyn snapped. or his ticket is. She looked at the man again, eyes narrowing, as if staring long enough might make him disappear. People print fake buses all the time. Everyone knows that. The man's jaw tightened, just slightly. A muscle flickered. He said nothing. From behind them, a low male voice cut in. "We need to keep the aisle clear." David Chen, another flight attendant, stood near the galley. Mid-40s, tired eyes. He had seen this kind of tension before. He didn't like where it went. "Thank you," Evelyn said without looking at him. Then to Jessica, quieter but sharper. "I'm uncomfortable." That word did it. Jessica's posture shifted. Training kicked in. High-value passenger. Claim of discomfort. The rulebook didn't care about context. It cared about liability. "What exactly is making you uncomfortable, Miss Hartman?" Jessica asked. Evelyn didn't hesitate. She never did. His behavior. He was pacing at the gate, talking to himself, watching people. And now he's sitting across from me like he owns the place. The man turned his head. "That's not true. Don't speak to me," Evelyn snapped, eyes flashing. "You already have." The air thickened. The cabin felt smaller. Someone coughed. Someone else looked away. Jessica hesitated. She glanced at the man's face. Calm. Too calm, Evelyn thought. Calm was suspicious when it didn't belong. "I'm just trying to get to Los Angeles," the man said. His voice was steady, but something lived underneath it. Pressure, restraint. "I have work waiting." Evelyn smiled. It was thin, predatory. "We all have work. That doesn't mean we get to pretend." She pressed the call button. The chime echoed, loud in the quiet. "I want a supervisor," she said, "and if he doesn't move, I want the captain." The word captain carried weight, authority, consequence. David stepped forward now. "Ma'am, let's lower our voices." "Don't tell me what to do," Evelyn said, turning on him like a blade. "I am not flying next to someone who makes me feel unsafe." Unsafe. The man stood slowly, hands visible, palms open. Not threatening, not submissive, just present. "I haven't done anything," he said. "That's exactly what they always say," Evelyn replied. Her voice rose. "Not much. Enough." And then something happens. She pointed at his bag, stowed neatly above. "What's in there?" The question hung, poisonous. Jessica's breath caught. David took a step back. Somewhere, a child cried behind the curtain separating cabins. The man looked up at the overhead bin, then back at Evelyn. For the first time, his calm cracked just a fraction. "Medical equipment," he said. Evelyn scoffed. "Of course it is." She turned toward the front of the plane and raised her voice, letting it carry. "Captain, I need assistance immediately. We have a potential security issue." Security issue. The words moved faster than reason, faster than truth. The cockpit door opened. Captain Robert Hale stepped out. Late 50s, broad shoulders. Decades of authority etched into his face. He took in the scene in one sweep. Evelyn, the man, the tension vibrating through the cabin like a live wire. "What's going on?" he asked. Evelyn rushed him, voice trembling now, perfectly calibrated. "Captain, thank God. This man threatened me. He's unstable. I believe he may be carrying something dangerous." The man stared at her, shock finally breaking through restraint. "That is a lie." Captain Hale looked at him, then at Evelyn, then at the flight attendants. "Sir," the captain said slowly, "I need you to step into the aisle with your bag." The man exhaled. Long, controlled. The sound of someone who understood what this meant in America, in a post-security world that did not give second chances to men who looked like him. "I am complying," he said. Evelyn's lips curved upward. Just a little. Satisfaction flickered. She had bent the world back into a shape she recognized. Sirens wailed faintly outside, growing louder. She did not know yet that they were not coming for him. She thought this was the end. She was wrong. The sirens grew louder, bleeding through the aluminum skin of the aircraft, slicing into the silence Evelyn had created and now enjoyed. They echoed up the jet bridge, sharp and official, the sound of authority arriving to validate her fear. 2 Port Authority officers stepped onto the plane, heavy boots, utility belts, radios crackling. The taller one, Officer Grant Wilson, scanned the cabin the way predators scan open ground. His partner, Officer Lena Morales, stayed half a step back, eyes moving faster, reading faces instead of posture. "Who reported the threat?" Wilson asked. Evelyn raised her hand immediately. Not trembling now. Steady. Certain. "I did." She pointed at the man standing in the aisle, hands still raised, bag dangling from his fingers. "That's him. He said things. He made me feel unsafe. He was watching people. And that bag." Her voice caught at just the right place. "I think there's something in it." Wilson didn't look at her for long, his eyes locked on the man. Hoodie, sneakers, calm face, wrong profile. "Sir," Wilson said, voice clipped, rehearsed, "turn around slowly. Hands on your head." The man obeyed without argument, fingers interlaced behind his skull. The position was too familiar. His shoulders tightened, just slightly, like someone bracing for impact that had nothing to do with fists. "I'm cooperating," he said. "My name is Michael Reed. I'm a physician. I have no weapon." Wilson nodded once, not listening. Morales stepped forward, hands firm, professional, running a quick pat down. "Nothing, no bulges, no metal," she shook her head at Wilson. "Clear." "Check the bag," Evelyn said sharply. "That's where it is. I saw him watching it." Morales hesitated. Her eyes flicked to the bag, to Michael's face. There was no panic there, no sweat. Just something heavier. Pressure. Wilson took the bag anyway. He set it on a metal service cart like it might explode if dropped. The zipper rasped as he pulled it open. The cabin leaned forward as one. Headphones, a hardcover medical textbook, papers neatly clipped. Then Wilson's hand hit something hard. Evelyn sucked in a breath. Loud, performative. "There. You see?" Wilson pulled it free. Not a gun, a silver case, brushed steel, sealed, stamped with a biohazard symbol and a hospital emblem. The air shifted. "What's this?" Wilson asked. Michael turned his head as far as the position allowed. "Open it." Wilson hesitated. Morales leaned closer, reading the label. "That's medical." "Open it," Michael said again. "Stronger now. Please." Wilson popped the latches. The seal hissed softly as air rushed in. Inside, foam cut perfectly to shape. Surgical instruments, fine, precise, scalpels thin as whispers, retractors, drills, and a 3-dimensional printed model of a child's skull, translucent blue, a dark mass highlighted near the brain stem. No one spoke. Morales swallowed. "This is surgery equipment." "Yes," Michael said. His voice was different now. The restraint was still there, but beneath it lived steel. "Pediatric neurosurgery. Custom set. I do not check it because it cannot be replaced." Wilson reached deeper, fingers brushing against a laminated badge. He pulled it free. "Dr. Michael Reed," he read. "Chief of Pediatric Neurosurgery, Johns Hopkins Hospital." The words landed like dropped glass. Captain Hale stepped closer, taking the badge, comparing the photo to the man in front of him. Same eyes, same mouth, same quiet gravity. "He's telling the truth," Hale said. "No," Evelyn snapped, stepping forward. "That proves nothing. Anyone can fake an ID, and those are knives." He brought knives on a plane. "They are surgical instruments," Morales said, sharper now. Evelyn laughed, high and brittle. "So was I supposed to feel safer knowing that?" Michael lowered his hands slowly as Wilson nodded permission. He turned to face Evelyn fully for the first time since the accusation. "I am flying to Los Angeles," he said. "I have a patient, 7 years old, brain tumor. Every hour matters." "Oh, please," Evelyn said. "That's convenient." The cockpit door opened again. Captain Hale's phone rang. He stepped aside, listening. His expression changed. The lines around his eyes deepened. "Yes," he said. "I understand. We'll comply." He hung up and turned back. "The flight is grounded," he announced. "We are deplaning everyone." Evelyn's mouth fell open. "What?" Hale didn't look at her. "Until this situation is fully documented and cleared, this aircraft is not moving." The cabin erupted. Groans, shouts. A man slammed his laptop shut. Someone cursed loudly. A woman began to cry near the curtain. "You can't do this," Evelyn said. "This is because of him." "No," Hale said, finally meeting her eyes. His voice was cold now. "This is because someone made a false security report." Evelyn's confidence faltered for the first time. "I was scared." "That's my right." Wilson stepped closer to her. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step aside. We need to take a statement." "Why?" she demanded. "I didn't do anything wrong." Morales spoke quietly. "You accused a man of carrying a weapon. That triggers federal protocols." Evelyn's breathing quickened. He made me uncomfortable. Michael watched her, not with anger, with something worse, understanding. Wilson's radio crackled. "Command wants charges filed," a voice said. "Interference with flight crew. False report." Evelyn's face drained of color. "You can't," she whispered. "Do you know who I am?" Michael spoke then, calm, precise. "Evelyn Hartman, founder of Hartman Interior Group, currently in litigation with your ex-husband over asset division." Her head snapped toward him. "How do you know that?" "Because your ex-husband's company provides liability insurance for this airline," Michael said. "And because he called me." The terminal seemed to tilt. "He asked why his neurosurgeon was delayed," Michael continued. "I'm operating on his goddaughter." Silence fell like a held breath. Captain Hale straightened. "Officer, remove Miss Hartman from the jet bridge." "No," Evelyn said, backing away. "You can't. I have meetings. I have a gala." Wilson took her arm. Firm. No ceremony. As she was led away, kicking now, shouting threats that bounced uselessly off the walls, Michael stood still, bag reclaimed, hands steady. But the flight was done. Crew time expired. Regulations were regulations. "I need to get to Los Angeles," Michael said to Hale. The words finally carried urgency. "Commercial flights won't work." Hale nodded once. "Come with me." They moved through a side door, away from the chaos. The crew lounge smelled like burnt coffee and fatigue. Hale pulled out his phone, dialing without hesitation. "I need a charter," he said. "Medical emergency." Minutes later, a station manager appeared, pale, apologetic. "There's a helicopter on the way. It'll take you to Teterboro. A Gulf Stream is waiting. The airline is covering it." Michael closed his eyes briefly. Exhaled. "Thank you," he said. On the tarmac, the helicopter blades chopped the air. Michael boarded without looking back. Through the glass of the terminal, he saw Evelyn Hartman sitting on a bench, wrists cuffed, makeup streaked, her handbag just out of reach. Phones were pointed at her now. Recording. The power had shifted. 4 hours later, the jet tore through the sky. Michael didn't notice the leather seats or the quiet. He studied scans, visualized angles, planned. At Van Nuys, a second helicopter waited. Then the hospital. The operating room. He scrubbed in, hoodie discarded, hands steady. 6 hours later, the tumor was out. The child lived. 3 days after that, Evelyn Hartman sat in a small office that smelled like dust and regret, staring at an invoice for $185,000 and a letter informing her she was banned from all major airlines. The door opened. Michael Reed stepped in, suit pressed, presence filling the room without effort. "I was asked to give a statement," he said. "You ruined my life," she sobbed. "I bought a ticket," he replied. "You did the rest." He placed a child's drawing on the desk. A stick-figure doctor with a cape. "She asked about you," he said softly. "I told her you couldn't see people clearly." He turned to leave. "I hope you learn," he said, without looking back. The door closed. Outside, planes took off. Morning came without mercy. The light through the narrow window was pale, institutional, flattening everything it touched. Evelyn Hartman sat at the metal table, hands folded the way she had seen other women do in movies when they were trying to look composed. It didn't work. The room smelled like disinfectant and stale coffee. Somewhere down the hall, a door slammed. Keys rattled. Time moved differently here. Slower. Heavier. Her phone lay face down in front of her. She hadn't turned it over in hours. She already knew what it would show. Outside that room, the story had escaped her. It wasn't hers anymore. The first video hit social media before the plane's wheels ever left the ground. A shaky recording from row 4. Her voice, clear as glass. "People like him don't sit here." Another clip followed, her pointing at the bag. "I think there's something in it." By noon, the clips had been stitched together, captioned, slowed down, dissected. By evening, her name was trending. Airport Karen. First class incident. JFK flight. Her assistant tried calling. Once. Twice to mule. Then stopped. Her publicist sent a text that read, "We need to talk immediately," followed by a longer one that said, "I'm so sorry." Her law firm sent nothing at all. Across the city, in a quiet hospital office with the blinds half drawn, Michael Reed sat alone, staring at a wall covered in scans. The surgery had ended hours ago. The adrenaline was gone now, leaving behind the dull ache in his shoulders and the weight in his chest. He should have been exhausted. He wasn't. His phone buzzed for the 3rd time in a minute. Unknown number. He let it go to voicemail. He knew what they wanted. Statements, sound bites, the clean arc of a hero story. A villain to point at, redemption to package. He wasn't interested. Down the hall, a nurse leaned against the wall, whispering into her phone. "That's him," she said. "The guy from the plane. He saved her." Michael closed his eyes, breathed. He thought of the girl's hand curling around his finger in recovery, the way her breathing had steadied once the pressure was gone. That was the only part of the last 72 hours that mattered. Everything else was noise. In Queens, in an office that hadn't seen a renovation since the 90s, Evelyn sat across from a man with ink stains on his cuffs and no patience left in his eyes. Her attorney flipped through a file thick enough to be a weapon. "They're not offering a settlement," he said. "They're charging." "This is ridiculous," Evelyn snapped. "I was scared." "You made a false security report," he replied. "On a commercial flight. That's federal." "I didn't lie," she said. Her voice wavered. I felt threatened. He looked at her over the rims of his glasses. "Feelings don't override facts." He slid a document toward her. "Airline damages. Fuel. Crew overtime. Passenger compensation. $185,000. She stared at the number, like it might blink. "And that's before the civil suits," he added. "The airline. The passengers. Possibly the doctor." "The doctor won't sue," she said quickly. "He said he wouldn't." The attorney leaned back. "You're not his concern." Another document. Thinner. Heavier. Permanent exclusion from all major domestic carriers. "You're grounded," he said. "For life." The word hit harder than jail ever could have. Evelyn laughed once. Then again. It sounded wrong in that room. You can't be serious. He didn't smile. Across the country, Michael stood at the foot of a hospital bed, watching a child sleep. Machines beeped softly. The tumor was gone. The danger passed. For now. Julian Parker stood beside him, eyes red, suit wrinkled. I don't know how to thank you. Michael shook his head. You don't. Julian hesitated. She called me. Michael didn't ask who. From holding, Julian continued. She wanted help. Michael looked at the girl, at the slow rise and fall of her chest. What did you say? Julian's jaw tightened. That my goddaughter almost died because someone decided their comfort mattered more than truth. Michael nodded once. 3 days later, Evelyn walked out of the courthouse into a wall of cameras. Flashbulbs exploded. Voices shouted her name, her old name, the one that used to open doors. Miss Hartman, do you regret your actions? Do you deny the accusations? Do you think this was racially motivated? She said nothing. Her lawyer pulled her through the crowd. Her heels clicked too loudly on the pavement. Every step felt exposed. That night, alone in her apartment, she finally turned her phone face up. Millions of views. Thousands of comments. Some angry, some cruel, some eerily calm. I hope she never flies again. This is what entitlement looks like. That man saved a child. She tried to ruin him. She dropped the phone. Across the city, Michael sat at his kitchen table, scrolling through a message he hadn't responded to yet. The district attorney had asked if he would consider a victim impact statement. He thought about the plane, the aisle, the way the word unsafe had been used like a weapon. He typed slowly. I will speak, but I don't want jail time. When the hearing came, the room was quiet. Michael stood at the podium. Evelyn sat behind him, smaller now, diminished. I didn't lose my life, he said, but someone else almost did. He talked about assumptions, about how quickly fear becomes authority when it's given the right uniform. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't look at her. When he finished, there was no applause, just the sound of breathing. Outside, reporters asked if he felt vindicated. He shook his head. That's not the word. He walked away. Months passed. The story faded, replaced by the next outrage, the next clip. But some things didn't return. Evelyn's firm rebranded. Quietly. Without her name. Her invitations stopped coming. The airport lounges she once treated like living rooms became places she could no longer enter. Michael went back to work. One afternoon, long after the cameras were gone, he boarded a flight again. Same route, same airport, different energy. No one stopped him. As he settled into his seat, he looked out the window at the planes lining the runway, steel birds waiting their turn. Power, he thought, had never been about where you sat. It was about what you chose to do when the world tested you. The engines roared, the plane lifted, and somewhere far below, a story closed its grip on someone who had once believed the sky belonged to her. The airport did not recognize her anymore. Evelyn Hartman stood at the curb outside Terminal 4, the sliding doors breathing open and shut without acknowledging her presence. She had come out of habit, not intention. The instinct to travel was still lodged deep in her bones, the way muscle memory survives after the limb is gone. A black sedan idled nearby, hired by the hour, engine ticking softly like it was waiting for permission. She checked her watch. No flight to catch, no lounge to retreat to. Just the low, constant churn of travelers moving past her with purpose. A man brushed her shoulder as he hurried by, earbuds in, eyes locked on his phone. He didn't apologize. He didn't look back. Evelyn flinched, as if struck. Inside the terminal, a wall of glass reflected her image back at her. The woman staring back looked familiar, but altered. Same posture, same clothes. But the certainty was gone. The armor had cracks. She turned away. Across the country, in a quiet wing of the hospital reserved for families who had learned to wait, Michael Reed sat with his hands clasped, listening to a woman talk about nothing and everything at once. The girl's mother, early 40s, exhausted, grateful in a way that felt fragile, like it might shatter if examined too closely. "She keeps asking when she can draw again," the woman said. "She wants to color everything. The walls, the nurses." Michael smiled faintly. "That's a good sign." "You know," she continued, voice dropping, "people keep telling me you're a hero." He shifted in his chair. "I'm a doctor." She shook her head. "You flew across the country after what they did to you." "I flew because she needed surgery," he said gently. Everything else was background. She looked at him for a long moment. "It shouldn't be." Michael didn't answer. Back in New York, the hearing room emptied slowly. Evelyn sat alone at the defense table long after her attorney had left, the echo of the judge's words still bouncing in her skull. No incarceration, probation, restitution, mandatory counseling, permanent flight restrictions upheld. The punishment was precise, calculated, designed to correct behavior, not erase a person. It felt like erasure anyway. She stood finally, legs stiff, and walked out through a side door. No cameras waited there. No crowd. Just a long hallway and the sound of her own footsteps, loud in the quiet. At home, the apartment felt too big, too clean. Every surface reflected her back at herself. She poured a glass of wine, then didn't drink it. She turned on the television, then muted it. Every channel carried a version of the same story, even when they weren't talking about her. A commentator spoke about patterns, another about accountability, a third about fear. Evelyn sat down on the floor, back against the couch, and laughed softly. "Fear," she said aloud. The word tasted bitter now. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "You won't remember me." I sat 2 rows back. She stared at the screen. "I'm the one who recorded. I just wanted to say, I hope you're okay. What you did was wrong. But I don't think you're done." Evelyn's fingers hovered over the keyboard. She typed 3 different responses. Deleted all of them. She put the phone down. In Los Angeles, Michael walked through the hospital parking garage, the sun low and orange between concrete levels. He unlocked his car and paused, one hand on the door. A man approached. Late 30s, business casual, nervous energy. "Dr. Reed?" he asked. Michael nodded. "I'm from the board," the man said quickly. "Not the hospital." "The airline." Michael's shoulders tightened. "I've already given my statement." "I know," the man said. "This isn't about that." He hesitated, then continued. "There's a review underway. Training. Protocols. Some people are going to lose their jobs." Michael exhaled slowly. "I didn't ask for that." "No," the man agreed. "But it's happening anyway." Michael looked past him at the ramp leading out into the street. Cars moving. Lives continuing. "What do you want from me?" The man swallowed. "Nothing. I just wanted you to know your restraint mattered." Michael considered that. "Restraint isn't passive," he said finally. "It's work." The man nodded, like he understood more than he had expected to. Weeks later, a letter arrived at Evelyn's apartment. Thick envelope, official seal. She didn't open it right away. She knew what it was before she touched it. Mandatory counseling intake. First session scheduled. Failure to attend would constitute a violation. She almost laughed again. Instead, she picked up her keys. The office was small, neutral colors, a box of tissues placed strategically within reach. The counselor, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and an unyielding posture, gestured for Evelyn to sit. "Why do you think you're here?" the woman asked. Evelyn crossed her legs, uncrossed them. "Because the court says I have to be." The counselor nodded. "And before that?" Evelyn opened her mouth, closed it. Minutes passed. "Because I was afraid," she said finally. The words felt heavy leaving her mouth. "And I didn't want to be." The counselor leaned forward. "Afraid of what?" Evelyn stared at the carpet. Patterns. Lines. Order. That I wasn't as important as I thought. Silence settled. Not uncomfortable. Intentional. Across the ocean of miles, Michael sat in a lecture hall, speaking to a room full of residents. He talked about surgical margins, vascular risks, the importance of slowing down when every instinct tells you to rush. A hand went up. "Can I ask you something not about medicine?" Michael nodded. "How did you stay calm?" the resident asked. "On the plane." Michael paused. He looked at the rows of young faces, hungry, idealistic, afraid. "I remembered that my reaction would become the story," he said, "and I refused to give fear authorship." The room was quiet. Back in New York, Evelyn stood at the window of her apartment, watching planes cut white lines across the sky. She had started keeping the curtains open. It hurt less that way. She picked up a piece of paper from the counter. A crayon drawing someone had mailed to her anonymously. A child, a hospital bed, a doctor with a cape. No villain, no labels. Evelyn pressed it flat with her palm. For the first time since the flight, she felt something crack open that wasn't anger or humiliation. Regret, she realized, wasn't loud. It was persistent. It stayed. The city outside moved on. Planes rose and fell. People judged and were judged. Power shifted hands without announcing itself. And somewhere between a grounded woman and a man who refused to be defined by a moment, the story kept going, gathering weight, pulling toward something larger than either of them. The letter arrived on a Tuesday, thin and unassuming, slipped beneath Evelyn Hartman's door like an afterthought. No return address, no letterhead. Just her name, written carefully, almost politely. She stared at it for a long time before picking it up. In another life, unopened mail had meant opportunity. Invitations, contracts, first looks. Now it meant consequence. Inside was a single page. Ms. Hartman, you do not know me. I am not a lawyer, a journalist, or a judge. I am a grandmother. I was on flight 402, row 3. I watched everything. Evelyn sat down slowly. I watched you decide who belonged and who did not. I watched a good man stand still while you tried to erase him. And I watched the rest of us say nothing. That last sentence burned. I have lived long enough to know that shame can either harden a person or open them. I hope, for your sake, it opens you. Evelyn folded the letter with hands that trembled despite her effort to still them. She pressed it flat on the table, as if keeping it there might keep the words from spreading. She poured coffee she did not drink. The apartment was quiet in a way that felt intentional, like the city itself was withholding noise from her. Across the country, Michael Reed walked into a conference room where his name was printed on a placard he had not asked for. The hospital administrators smiled too quickly. Gratitude mixed with calculation. He recognized the look. We'd like you to consider a role, one of them said. Advisory, patient advocacy. You've become a symbol. Michael leaned back. I didn't volunteer to be one. No, the woman said, but symbols exist whether they consent or not. He thought of the plane again, of how still he had forced himself to remain, of how much effort that stillness had cost. I'll think about it, he said. That night, Evelyn dreamed of the cabin, not the shouting, not the sirens. Just the moment before, the quiet, the split second when she could have stopped, chosen differently. In the dream, she opened her mouth and no sound came out. She woke with her heart racing. The counseling sessions continued. Week after week, the questions changed shape but not direction. What did you lose? The counselor asked. My life, Evelyn said automatically. The counselor waited. My illusion of it, Evelyn corrected, quieter. They talked about fear, about how fear seeks permission to become cruelty, about how power, when unexamined, feeds on silence. Evelyn listened more than she spoke now. Listening was new, uncomfortable. It required surrender. One afternoon, she found herself back near the airport again, this time by design. Not inside. Never inside her. But close enough to hear the engines. She stood at a chain-link fence near the perimeter road, watching planes lift into the sky, their bellies heavy with lives she would never intersect again. A child stood beside her, clutching a toy airplane. His father crouched nearby, pointing upward. See that one? That's going to California. The boy smiled, eyes wide. Evelyn swallowed. In Los Angeles, Michael sat across from Julian Parker in a quiet restaurant that valued privacy over trendiness. Julian looked different now, softer, less frantic. "They're moving ahead with the lawsuit," Julian said, "against her." Michael set his fork down. "You don't have to." Julian met his eyes. "It's not about her anymore. It's about precedent." Michael considered that. He had learned that word recently. Precedent. The thing that allowed patterns to continue or break. "Do what you think is right," he said. Julian nodded. "You changed how I think about right." The news cycle flared briefly when the civil filings became public. Headlines used words like downfall and reckoning. Commentators debated remorse. Some insisted it was performative. Others insisted it was too late. Evelyn did not watch. Instead, she sat at her desk, writing letters she did not send. Apologies that felt insufficient. Explanations that sounded like excuses even as she wrote them. One letter she did send. "Dr. Reed, I am not asking for forgiveness. I know that is not mine to request. I am writing to acknowledge that what I did was wrong, and that I see it now without defenses. I do not expect a response. I simply did not want my silence to be mistaken for indifference." She read it twice, folded it once, sent it. Michael received it weeks later, slipped among hospital mail and conference invites. He recognized the handwriting immediately. He read it once. Then again. He did not respond, but he did not throw it away. At a hospital fundraiser months later, Michael stood at the edge of the room, watching donors cluster around speakers who knew how to perform gratitude. A woman approached him. Mid-60s, elegant, measured. "I was on that flight," she said. Michael nodded. "I didn't say anything," she continued. "I've thought about that every day since." He studied her face. The honesty there was unguarded. "What you do after matters more," he said. She exhaled, like she'd been holding her breath for months. Back in New York, Evelyn packed up the last of her office. The sign with her name had already been removed. The walls were bare where awards had hung. She paused at the doorway, looking back at the empty room. There was no ceremony, no soundtrack, just the sound of her own breathing. As she turned to leave, her phone buzzed. A notification from an unknown sender. A photo. A child in a hospital bed, holding a crayon drawing. The doctor beside her smiled, tired but steady. The message beneath it read, "She wanted you to see this. She's going to be okay." Evelyn sat down on the floor. She did not cry loudly. She cried the way people cry when something finally lands, when denial has nowhere left to hide. Outside, the city moved. Cars honked. Planes climbed. Somewhere, a surgeon scrubbed in. Somewhere, a woman learned how to sit with the consequences of her fear. The story was no longer about a flight. It was about what followed. And neither of them could turn away from that anymore. The invitation arrived without ceremony, tucked between utility bills and a grocery flyer, its simplicity almost insulting in how ordinary it looked. Evelyn Hartman almost threw it away. She stood in her kitchen, envelope in hand, rereading the return address. Community Mediation Forum, Brooklyn, Tuesday evening. Voluntary attendance encouraged. Voluntary. The word lingered. She had learned the hard way how loaded certain words could be. Unsafe. Threat. Voluntary. She placed the envelope on the counter and stared at it until the kettle began to scream. The sound made her flinch. For a moment, she was back on the plane, heart racing, convinced that control was something you either seized or lost forever. She turned the stove off and sat down. Across the country, Michael Reed stood at the sink in a locker room, scrubbing his hands longer than necessary. The surgery had gone well. Another child. Another family pulled back from the edge. The routine should have been comforting by now. It wasn't. "You coming to the panel?" a resident asked from behind him. Michael dried his hands. "Which one?" "The hospital board thing. Implicit bias. Aviation incident guy." The resident smiled awkwardly, realizing too late how that sounded. Michael met his eyes in the mirror. "I have a name." The resident flushed. "Sorry. I meant—" "I know what you meant," Michael said. He picked up his bag. "I'm not coming." That night, Evelyn walked into a church basement that smelled faintly of coffee and old wood. Folding chairs were arranged in a loose circle. There were no cameras, no name tags, just people. She took a seat near the back. A woman spoke first. Middle-aged, schoolteacher. "I called the police on a student once," she said. "I thought I was protecting my class. I was wrong." A man followed. Delivery driver. "I cross the street when I see certain people. I don't want to, but I do." Each story landed without judgment. The room absorbed them like a held breath. When it was Evelyn's turn, her throat tightened. She hadn't prepared anything. Preparation felt dishonest now. "I used to think fear was instinct," she said. "Something you couldn't help." She paused. Faces watched her. Not hostile, curious. "I know now it's a habit," she continued, "and I fed it." Silence followed. Not forgiving, not condemning, just present. She walked home lighter than she had in months, though nothing tangible had changed. Weeks passed. Michael found himself at an airport again, this time for a conference. He moved through the terminal with the same efficiency as before, but something in him stayed alert in a new way. Not defensive. Aware. At security, a man in line stared at him too long. Michael noticed, filed it away. Let it pass. The conference was dull. Panels recycled the same language. Diversity, inclusion, training modules, applause on cue. Afterward, a woman approached him. Airline executive, early 50s, sharp suit, sharper eyes. "We'd like your input," she said, "not as a speaker, as a consultant." Michael considered her. "On what?" "Policy," she said. "Real ones." He nodded slowly. "Then it won't be comfortable." She smiled faintly. "We're past comfort." In New York, Evelyn began volunteering at a legal clinic, filing papers, answering phones. No one knew her name. It was both humbling and relieving. One afternoon, a young man argued loudly with a receptionist, voice rising, frustration spilling out of him. Evelyn watched the tension ripple through the room. She felt the old instinct spark, the urge to label, to control. She stood up. "Can I help?" she asked him gently. He turned, startled. His anger faltered. "They lost my paperwork." Evelyn nodded. "That happens. Let's find it." They did. Later, as she walked home, she realized her hands were shaking. Not from fear, from effort. Michael sat on a plane again, window seat, watching clouds flatten beneath him. The woman beside him glanced over, hesitated, then smiled politely. "Long flight," she said. "Yes," he replied. She hesitated again. "I saw you on the news." "A while back." He waited. "You handled that with a lot of grace," she said. Michael looked back out the window. "I handled it," he said. "That's all." When the plane landed, he stood with the rest, unremarkable in the crowd. That anonymity felt earned now, not imposed. Evelyn attended the mediation forum regularly. She listened more than she spoke. She learned how often silence had been mistaken for neutrality, how often neutrality had enabled harm. One evening, the facilitator mentioned a guest speaker scheduled for the following month. A surgeon, someone who had experienced public profiling. Evelyn's chest tightened. She did not sleep that night. Michael received the invitation 2 weeks later. He almost declined. Almost. Then he thought of the resident, of the consultant, of the girl with the crayons. He accepted. The night of the forum, Evelyn arrived early and took a seat near the front. Her hands rested in her lap, still. When Michael entered the room, conversation softened, not in reverence, in recognition. He spoke without notes. He talked about pressure, about the difference between danger and discomfort, about how systems amplified personal fear until it became policy. "I wasn't exceptional that day," he said. "I was prepared. There's a difference." The room listened. From her seat, Evelyn felt the words land not like accusation, but like invitation, to see more clearly, to do better without being absolved. Afterward, people gathered around him. Questions, gratitude, stories. Evelyn waited until the room thinned. She approached slowly. "Dr. Reed," she said. He turned. His face registered recognition. Not surprise. "Yes." She nodded. "Thank you for coming." He studied her for a moment. "Thank you for listening." There was no handshake, no forgiveness offered or requested. Just an acknowledgement, clean and contained. As Michael left the building, he felt something loosen in his chest. Not resolution. Momentum. Evelyn watched him go, then turned back to the circle of chairs. She sat down, alone now, and breathed. Outside, the city hummed. Inside, something had shifted. Not an ending, a continuation. The kind that demanded more than regret, the kind that asked for work. The day the verdict became final, no one knocked on Evelyn Hartman's door. There was no announcement, no ceremony, just an update posted quietly to a government website that almost no one would read past the headline. Probation terms affirmed, restitution schedule approved, permanent flight ban upheld. The world did not pause. Evelyn learned this slowly, in pieces, in the way the cafe near her apartment stopped greeting her by name, in the way conversations died when she entered certain rooms, not dramatically, just politely, in the way invisibility arrived not as punishment, but as absence. She had once believed power meant being seen. Now she understood how much power lived in choosing to see. On the other side of the country, Michael Reed stood in an operating room gallery, watching a younger surgeon take the lead. He had insisted on it, not because the surgeon wasn't ready, but because leadership, he had learned, required stepping back as often as stepping in. "Your turn to sit on your hands," he'd told her earlier. She'd laughed nervously. Now her hands were steady, her voice calm. Michael watched, corrected only when necessary, trusted when it mattered. When the procedure ended successfully, applause did not break out. It never did. Medicine didn't celebrate like that. It moved on. Later in the hallway, the surgeon stopped him. "They asked me if I was nervous," she said. "I told them no. I told them I'd seen worse." Michael smiled faintly. "You had." That evening, Evelyn sat at her small kitchen table, a stack of envelopes spread out in front of her. Bills, notices, a handwritten card from a woman she'd met at the mediation forum. It read simply, "Thank you for staying." She traced the words with her finger. Her phone buzzed. A message from the legal clinic coordinator. "We have an intake tomorrow. Can you cover the front desk?" Evelyn typed back yes before she could overthink it. At the clinic the next day, a man slammed his paperwork down on the counter. "They keep losing my file," he said, voice sharp with exhaustion. "Nobody listens." Evelyn met his gaze. "I'm listening now." He hesitated, anger recalibrating. "You are?" "Yes." Something in her tone made him sit. She found the file. Again. It took patience. It took time. It took the kind of attention she had once reserved only for people who mattered. He thanked her quietly before leaving. She sat back in her chair and felt the echo of that gratitude linger. Not as validation, as responsibility. In Chicago, Michael stood on a small stage at a university lecture hall, addressing a room of students who looked too young to be carrying the questions they were already forming. A student raised her hand. "Do you think what happened to you changed you?" Michael considered that. "It revealed me," he said. "That's different." Another student asked, "Would you do anything differently?" He paused. The room leaned in. "No," he said. "But I understand now why some people can't do what I did. And that understanding matters." After the lecture, a professor walked with him toward the exit. "You're careful with your words." Michael nodded. Words are how things start. In New York, Evelyn received an email she had not expected. An invitation to speak. Not on a panel, not at a conference, at a small community college in Queens, a class on ethics. The professor had followed the case, had followed the aftermath. "We don't need you to justify anything," the email read. "We need you to talk about what happens after consequences." Evelyn stared at the screen for a long time. She accepted. The classroom smelled faintly of dry erase markers and old books. Students shifted in their seats as Evelyn stood at the front. She wore no jewelry, no heels, just a plain jacket and shoes, worn soft at the edges. "I'm not here to explain myself," she began. Her voice did not waver. "I'm here to explain how easy it is to become the villain in your own story." A student crossed her arms, skeptical. "Good." Evelyn talked about fear, about habit, about how systems reward certainty, even when certainty is wrong. She did not ask for sympathy. She did not soften the edges. When she finished, no one clapped, but no one looked away either. Afterward, a student approached her. "Do you think people can really change?" Evelyn answered honestly. "I think they can learn. Change is what they do with that learning." On a flight to Seattle, Michael watched the seatbelt sign flicker off. He stood, stretched, and waited. The aisle filled slowly. A man ahead of him fumbled with his bag, blocking the way. "It's fine," Michael said gently, though no one had asked. The man glanced back, surprised. "Thanks." They waited together. Michael thought of how often impatience had been mistaken for urgency, of how urgency, when unchecked, became justification. He stepped off the plane into cool air and felt grounded in a way flying had never given him before. Weeks later, Evelyn attended another mediation session. A new face sat across the circle. A young woman. Nervous. Defensive. "I didn't mean it like that," the woman said. "I just felt unsafe." Evelyn recognized the phrasing instantly. She leaned forward slightly. "What did unsafe mean to you?" she asked. The woman hesitated. Thought. "I don't know." Evelyn nodded. "That's where it starts." Michael received a message late one night from the hospital administration. They had approved the new training protocols, real ones, mandatory, ongoing, not a single workshop to check a box. He read the message twice, then closed his phone. In the quiet of his apartment, he allowed himself one deep breath of satisfaction. Not triumph. Progress. Evelyn walked home through her neighborhood as the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the sidewalk. She passed a travel agency window. Posters of beaches, mountains, destinations she would never reach by air. She did not stop. Instead, she kept walking, hands in her pockets, head up, present in the body she still inhabited, the city that still held her. The story had shrunk in the public eye. It always did. But for those who lived inside it, the work continued. Michael stood in an operating room again, hands steady, focus absolute. Evelyn sat at a desk again, listening, filing, staying. Neither of them sought redemption. They sought alignment. And somewhere between a man who refused to be erased and a woman who learned to stop erasing others, something durable took shape. Not justice as spectacle, justice as practice. The kind that doesn't end when the cameras leave. The kind that demands tomorrow. The call came just after midnight. the kind that bypassed silence and went straight for the spine. Michael Reed sat up in the bed before the second ring finished, phone already in his hand. He didn't say hello. He never did on nights like this. "We've got a transfer," the voice said. An anesthesiologist he trusted. Tired. Controlled. 8-year-old. Traumatic bleed. Rural hospital. They can't stabilize. Michael swung his legs over the side of the bed. "I'm on my way." Outside, Los Angeles was quiet in that thin, deceptive way it got before dawn. The streets looked calm. They never told the truth. At the hospital, lights snapped on as he moved through corridors that smelled of antiseptic and sleep deprivation. Scrubs, gloves. The ritual grounded him. This was the part of his life untouched by commentary or consequence. There was only anatomy. Only time. In the operating room, the child lay impossibly small against the table. Machines breathed for her. Numbers flickered. Michael leaned in, eyes narrowing. "Show me the scans." As the images came up, his jaw set. Complicated. Delicate. No margin for error. "Call Neuro ICU," he said, "and get me the vascular tray." Hours later, when the bleeding was controlled and the pressure relieved, he stepped back, hands trembling now that the danger had passed. He closed his eyes briefly, not in prayer, in acknowledgement. "She's stable," someone said. Michael nodded. He peeled off his gloves, already thinking about the next steps, the next hours, the next family that would need answers, spoken slowly and honestly. By the time he left the hospital, the sun was climbing, pale and insistent. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Saw the news about the protocols. "Proud of you." He didn't need to ask who it was. Across the country, Evelyn Hartman stood at a bus stop, coat pulled tight against the early morning chill. The city was waking around her. Delivery trucks, coffee carts, the smell of bread from a bakery down the block. She checked the schedule taped to the pole. 10 minutes late. She exhaled, then waited. Waiting had become a practice. At the legal clinic, the day unfolded in familiar patterns. Intake forms, quiet conversations, the hum of fluorescent lights. Mid-morning, a woman hesitated at the door, late 30s, tired eyes, 2 children clinging to her coat. "I don't know if I'm in the right place," the woman said. Evelyn smiled gently. "Let's find out together." They did. That afternoon, the coordinator pulled Evelyn aside. "There's a position opening. Paid. Part-time. Intake supervisor." Evelyn blinked. "I don't have credentials." "You have consistency," the coordinator said. "That counts." Evelyn thought about it all the way home. About work that didn't carry her name but carried weight. About staying. She accepted the next day. Weeks passed. News cycles turned. Attention shifted. Then another incident hit the headlines. Different airport, different city. Similar accusations. This time, the outcome was faster. Protocols kicked in. De-escalation teams intervened. The passenger was questioned calmly. The flight departed with minimal delay. Michael watched the coverage from a hotel room in Denver, the muted television casting blue light across the walls. The anchor spoke about changes, training, lessons learned. He turned the television off. Progress didn't need applause. At a community college auditorium in Queens, Evelyn stood again at a podium. This time, the room was fuller. Students, faculty, community members. She spoke about accountability not as punishment, but as interruption, about stopping the pattern before it finished its sentence. A man in the back raised his hand. "Do you think you deserve a second chance?" Evelyn considered the question carefully. "I think everyone deserves the opportunity to do better," she said. "Whether they take it is the real measure." Afterward, a young woman approached her. "My father was profiled at an airport," she said quietly. "He never talks about it. Thank you for saying what you did." Evelyn nodded, throat tight. "I'm sorry it happened to him." She meant it. In Seattle, Michael sat across from an airline safety committee. The room was windowless, functional. People took notes. "We need to talk about language," he said. "About how words like threat get interpreted." A man across the table frowned. "We can't ignore safety concerns." "No," Michael agreed. "But we can learn the difference between danger and discomfort, and we can train for it." Silence followed, then nods. Later, alone in his hotel room, Michael sat on the edge of the bed, exhaustion finally catching him. He thought of the plane again, of how close everything had come to breaking. He thought of Evelyn, standing in that basement room, listening. Change, he realized, was rarely loud. It arrived in policy updates, in quieter conversations, in people choosing differently the next time. On a rainy evening in New York, Evelyn stood at her window, watching water streak down the glass. She held a letter she had received earlier that day, from the grandmother. Row 3. "I saw you speak online. You looked different. I wanted you to know I'm still watching. In a good way." Evelyn folded the letter carefully and placed it in a drawer with the others. Not trophies, reminders. Her phone buzzed. A message from Michael. "You're doing the work." She stared at the screen, surprised. Then she typed back, "So are you." There was no further exchange. They didn't need one. In Los Angeles, Michael scrubbed in again. Another surgery, another child, another quiet battle fought under bright lights. In New York, Evelyn locked up the clinic late, the street empty and wet, her reflection wavering in puddles as she walked. The story had spread outward now, touching places neither of them could see. Airports, classrooms, boardrooms, living rooms. It had become less about a woman who accused and a man who endured, and more about a society learning, slowly, how fragile its assumptions were. And though neither of them would ever forget the sound of sirens echoing up a jet bridge, they were no longer defined by that moment. They were defined by what followed, by what they chose to build in the quiet after the noise. And the work was not finished. The envelope was heavier than it needed to be, the kind that suggested finality before it was ever opened. Evelyn Hartman held it in both hands at the small desk she now used as an office, the wood scarred, the drawer slightly crooked. The return address belonged to a law firm she no longer tried to impress. She already knew what it contained. She opened it anyway. The last civil settlement. Numbers spelled out. Payment schedules fixed. No more appeals. No more headlines. Just responsibility, laid out in careful language that left no room for interpretation. She signed where indicated, slowly, deliberately. When she finished, she sat back and waited for something to happen. Nothing did. The quiet was complete. Across the country, Michael Reed stood in a hospital corridor, watching a janitor polish the floor. The man worked methodically, earbuds in, moving backward, so he could see what he'd already cleaned. It struck Michael how rarely people noticed the work that kept everything functional. "Dr. Reed?" Michael turned. A hospital administrator stood a few feet away, holding a tablet. The board approved the final policy revisions. They go live next quarter. Michael nodded. "Good." "They wanted to thank you," the administrator added. "Formally." Michael considered it. "They can thank the people who won't be pulled off planes anymore." The administrator smiled faintly. Fair enough. Later that week, Michael found himself back at JFK. Not on a flight, in a conference room overlooking the tarmac. He watched planes taxi while he spoke to a group of airline trainers. Faces serious, pens moving. "Bias training fails when it's theoretical," he said. "You have to simulate pressure, fear, authority. The moment when someone says they're uncomfortable and everyone else stops thinking." A trainer raised a hand. "What if we get it wrong?" Michael met his eyes. "You will. The point is what you do next." Outside the glass, a plane lifted cleanly into the sky. In New York, Evelyn stood in front of a mirror, adjusting a name badge. Intake supervisor. The words still felt strange. She tested the clip, straightened it, then stepped into the clinic. A young intern looked up. "Morning." "Morning," Evelyn replied. It was an ordinary exchange. It mattered more than she could explain. Midday, a woman burst through the door, voice raised, frustration spilling over. Papers shook in her hands. "They told me to come back again," the woman said. "I can't keep missing work." Evelyn stood and approached slowly. Not too close, not too far. "Let's sit down," she said. "Tell me what's happening." The woman's shoulders dropped a fraction. She sat. As Evelyn listened, she caught herself noticing the old impulse, the urge to assess, to categorize, to decide quickly who deserved effort. She pushed it aside. Listening took longer. It always did. But when the woman left, calmer, paperwork in hand, Evelyn felt the quiet satisfaction of something done right. That night, she walked home past the river, the city lights stretching across the water in broken lines. She stopped at the railing and watched a ferry cut through the dark, steady and unremarkable. For a moment, she imagined herself on it, moving forward without spectacle. In Los Angeles, Michael sat at his kitchen table, reviewing scans on a tablet while a pot of coffee cooled beside him. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He almost ignored it. "Dr. Reed, this is the father of the little girl from Denver. I just wanted to say she's walking again." Michael closed his eyes. "Thank you," he typed back. "That's wonderful news." He set the tablet down and let himself sit with that for a moment. Just the fact. Just the relief. Weeks later, Evelyn received an email from the mediation forum. A request, not an invitation. They wanted her help facilitating sessions. Not as a speaker, as a listener. She hesitated, then agreed. The room was familiar now. Folding chairs, coffee, the hum of the city just outside. A man spoke about a confrontation at a grocery store. A woman talked about crossing the street at night. Fear threaded through every story, shaping decisions in ways most people never examined. When it was Evelyn's turn, she didn't talk about the plane. She talked about the moment after. The long stretch of days when nothing dramatic happened, and change had to be chosen anyway. It doesn't end with being sorry, she said. It starts there. After the session, a young man approached her. Do you ever stop being afraid? Evelyn thought about it. No, she said. But fear doesn't get to drive anymore. In Seattle, Michael addressed a group of medical students nearing graduation. He spoke about technical skill, yes, but also about presence. About what patients remember long after procedures fade into memory. They remember how you made them feel, he said. And so do people who meet you on your worst day. A student asked, Do you think you'll ever stop being that guy from the plane? Michael smiled slightly. I already have. The months stacked quietly. Seasons shifted. The story receded further into the background, resurfacing occasionally in think pieces and training manuals, but no longer attached to daily outrage. Evelyn stopped checking her name online. Michael stopped being asked about it in interviews. One afternoon, Evelyn received a message from the clinic. A donor wanted to meet her, not to discuss the past, to talk about expansion. She went. She listened. She spoke plainly. The donor nodded. You're different from what I expected. Evelyn met his gaze. So am I. In Los Angeles, Michael stood on a balcony outside an operating room, hands resting on the railing as the sun dipped low. A nurse joined him. You did good today, she said. He nodded. We did. As the light faded, Michael thought of how close everything had come to going wrong. How a single accusation, spoken with confidence, had nearly rewritten multiple lives. He thought of how many similar moments never made headlines. Across the country, Evelyn locked the clinic door and dropped the keys into her bag. She paused, listening to the city breathe around her. She no longer looked up at planes with longing. She looked at people, at moments, at choices. The story had narrowed now, distilled down to its core. Not spectacle, not shame. Responsibility. On both coasts, in different rooms, two people who would never be friends, never share a table, continued their separate work. Neither sought redemption. They sought integrity. And that, finally, was enough to let the story move toward its end. The morning Evelyn Hartman woke without dread was the morning she knew the story had finally loosened its grip. It wasn't relief. It wasn't forgiveness. It was quieter than that. The absence of rehearsed defenses. The absence of the need to explain herself to an invisible jury. She lay still in bed, listening to the city wake up, and for the first time since the flight, her chest did not tighten at the thought of being seen. She rose, dressed, and walked to the clinic as she did most days now. The streets smelled like rain and coffee. Delivery trucks double-parked. A man argued with a meter maid. Life moved without consulting her. Inside the clinic, the lights flicked on one by one. The intern waved. Someone laughed softly in the back office. Evelyn set her bag down, straightened a stack of intake forms, and began. Mid-morning, a boy sat in the waiting area, coloring on scrap paper. His mother whispered apologies for the noise. Evelyn waved them off. The boy held up his drawing. A plane in the sky, people inside, everyone smiling. Evelyn smiled back. She did not look away. Across the country, Michael Reed stood at a scrub sink, hands moving through the practiced sequence he had taught 100 residents. Water ran warm. Soap foamed. The ritual was familiar, grounding. In the operating room, a child waited. A family waited. None of them knew the details of his past months. They knew only the steadiness of his voice when he said hello. The surgery was long, demanding, precision layered on patience. When it ended, the relief in the room was palpable, the kind that did not need words. Michael stepped back, removed his gloves, and nodded to the team. Good work. In the hallway, a young resident lingered. Dr. Reed, she said, hesitant. I wanted to thank you. For what? He asked. For showing us that restraint is a skill, she said. Not a weakness. Michael considered that as he walked away. The lesson had cost him more than he would ever say, but it had not been wasted. That afternoon, Evelyn attended a mediation session she now helped facilitate. The circle filled. New faces. Familiar tension. Fear always arrived early, sat heavy, waited to be addressed. A man spoke about a confrontation at a bus stop. A woman described the instinct to clutch her bag. Words spilled, some clumsy, some raw. Evelyn listened. When it was her turn, she spoke briefly. About habits, about how quickly certainty hardens into judgment, about how silence can feel safer than interruption, and how dangerous that safety is. No one applauded. They didn't need to. When the session ended, the grandmother from row 3 approached her. The woman's hair was silver now, eyes sharp. I'm glad you stayed, she said. So am I, Evelyn replied. They parted without ceremony. Weeks passed. Seasons shifted. The city changed its light. Headlines moved on, as they always did, chasing the next moment of outrage, the next villain, the next redemption arc. This story was no longer convenient. It had become too complicated for easy consumption. Michael declined more invitations than he accepted. He spoke when it mattered. He stayed quiet when it didn't. He watched the policies he had helped shape roll out, imperfect but real, changing the texture of small moments most people would never notice. At an airport in the Midwest, a flight attendant paused before escalating a complaint. She asked another question instead. The flight departed on time. No one wrote about it. In New York, Evelyn received a promotion at the clinic. Nothing flashy, more responsibility, more listening. She accepted without hesitation. The work fit her now. It demanded attention without granting applause. One evening, she walked along the river again, the lights trembling across the water. She thought of the woman she had been. The certainty, the armor. She did not despise that woman. She understood her now. That understanding did not excuse anything. It clarified it. Across the country, Michael stood at his kitchen window, watching dusk settle over the city. His phone buzzed with a message from a former patient's family. A photo. A child running across a yard, arms outstretched, alive. He smiled, small and private. They never met again. Not properly. Not in a way stories usually demand. Their lives did not intersect beyond that single, volatile moment and the long shadow it cast. That was enough. Because this was never a story about reconciliation. It was a story about consequence. About what happens after the cameras leave, after the outrage fades, after the easy narratives collapse. It was about a man who refused to surrender his dignity when the world tried to strip it from him, and a woman who learned, too late and then daily, what dignity actually required. The flight that never took off became a footnote. The work that followed did not. Planes continued to rise and fall. People continued to judge and be judged. Power continued to move quietly through rooms, shaping outcomes without asking permission. But somewhere between a raised voice and a steady one, between fear weaponized and fear examined, something shifted. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough to matter. If this story stayed with you, if it made you pause, if it reminded you that character reveals itself under pressure and responsibility begins where comfort ends, then stay with us. Like this story, subscribe for more, and share your thoughts in the comments with 3 simple words. See people clearly.